From the Fans Talk Podcast family at fanstalkpodcast.com, this is episode 51 of Fans Talk TNA. My name is Nick, and with us is Garvin. Say hello, Garvin.
Hello, Garvin.
Alright, tonight we are recapping and reviewing the October 21st episode of Impact Wrestling. Before we get rolling on that, we say this every episode, and it really does bear repeating, that if you enjoy the series and you want to see it continue, go ahead and join the Squared Circle of Trust. For as little as $1 a month, you'll help us cover the costs of recording, hosting, and distributing our episodes, and you'll keep us motivated to keep coming back to the show. So go ahead and head on over to fanstalktna.com right now, click the big green button, and you can subscribe today. Let your voice and your support be heard. Moving on to this week's Impact. We got a lot more World Title Series action. We also got a replay of the main event for Bound for Glory. So if you missed that, good for you. You got a freebie, I guess. Before we really talk about that, if the World Title Series ended today, your round of 16 would be Austin Aries and EC3 from Group Champions, Drew Galloway and Rockstar Spud from Group UK, Awesome Kong and Brooke from the Knockouts, Kenny King and Mahabali Shera from the Wildcards, Abyss and Bobby Roode from TNA Originals. From the Tag Team Specialists, you got Matt Hardy and Robbie E, Manic and Tigre Uno from the X Division, and from Group Future 4, you got Jesse Goddard's locked in, and it would be a toss-up between Micah and Eli Drake. So, Garvin, it's been a couple weeks. What have you thought about the World Title Series thus far?
If you remember, I was pretty adamant that I didn't believe that TNA had prepared for this, and were just throwing random matches together, and this was all just, well, we can't tape any new shows, so here's some, random dark matches that we had throughout the year. And that's still sort of possible, maybe, but I think just the way it's been organized and the fact that they were able to bring Austin Aries back to do some interview spots, I think it's more believable that this was like a backup plan just in case. And because of that, I think how they are executing this is actually really cool. The idea that you are basically putting almost everyone in the company in this huge tournament, for the main title is really a cool move. And it's something that you don't see often enough. It's too often that we see just the same people fighting for the same titles every single week, year after year, and to, have the opportunity for like even the knockouts to get involved in the top title race. I think it just adds a lot more interest. So I'm just looking at the last 2 weeks. I really enjoyed how they were organizing everything. This week seemed to be a little more match heavy, not as much story, but still, I like it.
Yeah, by and large, I've liked it too. Last week especially, I thought that was a good way to kick off. There are moments where it's incredibly obvious just how dated some of the matches are. Like Mahabali Shera wearing trunks to say Koya on them, or Manic having the mask again. One instance in particular, in the Aiden O'Shea versus Kenny King match, Aiden kept yelling, "Where are your boys?" which is clearly a reference to the BDC. But, yeah, by and large, with all the roundtables and, like you mentioned, the interview spot with Austin Aries, it is really neat that TNA kind of had this in their back pocket, and that we can have this to look forward to for a while, where I mentioned last week, it's just simple, straightforward matches. It's not overwrought like the whole invasion angles have been. It's just been really neat to watch.
Yeah, and the fact that every match and every conversation, every interview, every story is all having the same centralized focus. And Lucha Underground did this a little bit when they were first putting together they first put all of their competitors against one another to go in this tournament to name the first Lucha Underground champion. And it had your women wrestlers, it had everyone else in the company, and it was just very intriguing. And I think, TNA, by doing this, is borrowing that same idea that combining everything and making everyone compete against one another, it definitely makes it a lot more, not necessarily random feeling, but just that anything could take place.
Mm-hmm. Definitely agree with that. So have there been any standout matches to you over the last couple weeks?
Well, I did enjoy the EC3 versus Austin Aries match despite it ending in a draw. I thought the Rockstar Spud Grado match was it was funny. It wasn't a great match by any stretch of the imagination, but I thought it was just a good humor addition to the show. But otherwise, I think my favorite match right now has been Manic and DJ Z this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really solid one. I also rather enjoyed Tyrion and Mandrews. I think Mandrews played it pretty heavy, perhaps too much so on the whole skater gimmick. But other than that, I think they really showcased exactly why they could go with some of the heavyweights like Rude or Abyss or guys like that who are traditional world title contenders. A lot of emphasis on mat wrestling, chain wrestling, technical wrestling. It was really interesting to watch that.
So, quick question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Where did the skater gimmick come from for Mandrews? Because I don't remember ever seeing it. Is this our introduction to it?
I think it is for TV. For some reason, it's not striking me as completely out of the blue, but I don't recall exactly where I've seen it referenced. Maybe I'm just drawing connections from, Mandrews plays in a band that's kind of punk rock and skaters kind of go hand in hand. So maybe I'm forming attachments where maybe I shouldn't be, but yeah, it does seem like this is pretty new.
Yeah. The main gripe that I had to it was just that they continued to make references to, John Laurinaitis' old gimmick from the 80s, where he was like that skater guy. So I don't know. It just seemed kind of out of the blue. So I was caught off guard by it. And then there's just the fact that they continued to make those references made me almost not appreciate the character as a serious character because, we look so poorly on what John Laurinaitis did in the 80s with his gimmick.
Yeah, that is one thing, the whole reference deal, largely on Pope's side, where he keeps referencing past gimmicks of wrestlers. With Daya Trinidad mentioning that you would know her as Rosita, that's totally fine. It's even needed, maybe. But,
right.
Getting cute with shades of Austin Starr, or shades of Elijah Burke, or the Rose Daya Trinidad, at some point you stop becoming credible and you start becoming one of those internet smart marks. You hear the wrestlers always down talk about, I went on Wikipedia and found out some stuff about me. I wish that wouldn't be a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I like Pope on commentary as far as the energy that he brings, as far as how he calls the matches. I think it's pretty good. It's a nice alternative to what we've had in the past. But at the same time, like, all the references need to stop, and all the if you will needs to stop. He needs to move past that and just focus in on what we're seeing. You don't need to reference other talent when comparing it to what we're seeing on TV. Just talk up what we're seeing on TV. Make it feel like this is really important. And that's not just a Pope thing. That's across the industry right now. Is commentating doesn't always build up what we're seeing and why it's important. And that's what is failing right now from Pope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. Anything else from the World Title Series that you think, bears mentioning? Like, have there been any real upsets or, Mr. Anderson is mathematically eliminated now. What was that a surprise?
It was a surprise specifically because just just like right before the end of the match, I was writing a note to myself to remember to say that Anderson was good. I actually really liked Anderson. Mm-hmm. And it seems like that's always the case. Like as soon as I am like, you know what, he's actually an okay wrestler. I mean, I can get behind this guy. And then like then he fails. It's like, it was the same time when they wrote him off during the bully feud.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, I was really surprised, by that just because I thought he did so well, but they still add the nice, interesting side where, you know, he could play spoilers. So he could eliminate Austin Aries, or Lashley. I can't imagine they would eliminate EC3, but, it's always possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I do enjoy that, you know, in mentioning that he's playing the spoiler to EC3, like they do bring up the history and that Anderson was, I guess you could call the first, opponent in EC3's campaign for champ. So yeah, that was a nice touch and referencing that, even though it wasn't that long ago, still just having commentary bring that back was something nice to see.
Right.
One quick thing, I guess one last thing about the World Title Series that I'll mention is I don't really like the trend that they started this week of basically just giving us a highlight.
Yeah.
Kind of a raw replay of Group Future 4. Because I would have really enjoyed watching Jesse Goddard versus Crimson, or even Micah versus Eli Drake.
Yeah.
And to see that get, you know, overlooked in favor of showing the main event for Bound for Glory again. I get why they would. It's probably stipulated by Destination America. Is like, all right, if you get a pay-per-view, you're going to have to show the good stuff on TV again for us at some point. But that does set a worrying precedent about the rest of the World Title Series, I think.
I would like to know what Destination America quantifies as the good stuff. Because I don't think that main event would have really qualified as such a thing. But yeah, I'm with you. I was kind of surprised that they played as much of the match as they did. I think it was at least 2/3, maybe even the full match outside of intros. I can't recall how it started, but yeah, I was really surprised they did that. My only thought of why they would have shortened Jesse Goddard's and Crimson as well as Eli Drake and Micah is probably just because something happened during the match that would throw this would make it obvious that this was pre-taped. That was my only thought, like, because yeah, you're right. I mean, Eli Drake versus Micah, that is a match that I want to see. But yeah, that's my only thought. Maybe Jesse Goddard wasn't doing the full gimmick that he is now as far as the Adonis with the robe and everything else. Maybe he didn't do that specific match just because it was earlier in the year. I don't know. That's really the only thing that came to mind as far as why they would do that.
Yeah, that could be. The only problem I see with that idea is what they've done with Group Wildcard. You know, again, Aiden yelling, "Where are your boys?" Other things that make it obvious that this is from earlier. But yeah, I can see that. All right. Next week on Impact, we're obviously going to get more World Title Series action as we finish up with the group play session, phase 1 of the series, if you will. We're definitely going to be getting Gail Kim versus Awesome Kong, Mr. Anderson versus EC3, and Robbie E versus Matt Hardy. Any of those in particular looking forward to? I imagine Robbie E versus Matt Hardy might have caught your eye.
Well, Mr. Anderson versus EC3 is probably the match I'm most looking forward to, just to see if Anderson does spoil EC3. I still can't imagine that he would, but at the same time, like, that would be an interesting happening, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Robbie E versus Matt Hardy. Yes and no. Mostly no, because...
Really?
My expectation is that Hardy will win. That's really it.
Yeah, probably. I suppose I just thought that because, you know, Robbie E did as well as he did in his first match. And I guess I wouldn't have expected that against the Wolves.
Yeah, and really, right now in that group tag team specialist, Matt Hardy and Robbie E are tied with 3 points. Both Davey and Eddie have 0. So, yeah, and I guess a loss here wouldn't necessarily hurt Robbie E, depending on what happens with Davey and Eddie. Oh, you know what, though? That means that Davey versus Eddie is in 2 weeks. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Or maybe this next week. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm not looking forward to Gail Kim versus Awesome Kong.
Just because we've seen it so many times
Yeah,
beforehand?
well, we just had it like a few weeks back, so.
Yeah, I get you. All right, well, really, that's all there is to talk about the World Title Series thus far. Any final thoughts?
Well, yeah, actually, I want to get your thoughts on who hasn't scored yet. Do you think any of these names will advance, or do you think this final 16 that we have projected right now is it?
I kind of have a hard time seeing Eric Young not making it. It has been kind of interesting the way they've handled Group TNA Originals. Obviously, James Storm probably not going to advance. But picking Abyss to win his first match over EY was a really interesting decision, I think. We said it numerous times over the last several weeks. The best thing the Revolution ever did for its members was to split up. And Abyss is really a shining example of that because it looks like they're booking him as a serious world title contender.
Yeah.
Over just about anybody else in that division, maybe, with the possible exception of Bobby Roode. So, I have a hard time, even with all that, I have a hard time seeing EY remain winless or even getting knocked out of the series. Other than that, I think, there are cases to be made for things advancing the way they are. Like, definitely don't see Crazy Steve making a comeback or anything like that. I don't know if I see Brooke advancing over Gail Kim either. But, yeah, it looks like a pretty solid picture as we have it right now.
Yeah, I see Lashley advancing. I see EC3 and Lashley advancing. Austin Aries getting eliminated. I think Group UK is pretty accurate of who I would want to move forward.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, and you're right. Like Kenny King and Mahabali Shera, I think that would be a good pick. But I could also see it being Mahabali Shera and Aiden O'Shea.
Yeah, I do kind of want that to be the case as well. Just because Aiden O'Shea had such potential when he was during his first run. And, it really could go somewhere with this reinvention of himself. Obviously, they can't do much with Kenny King right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's very much a possibility that Aiden will make a comeback.
Yeah, and the only other change that I would, well, there's two, but Rude and in EY, like you were saying, I think EY needs to advance. So I would like to see Eric Young and Bobby Roode advancing from Group TNA Originals, and then the tag teams. I can't imagine that a Wolf would not advance.
I kind of like the idea of the Wolves not advancing, just because that would give us kind of a potential avenue once they do go to the round of 16 and other stories maybe start coming back. Maybe we could have some other pair that had also been knocked out come together to challenge the Wolves for the title. All right, I guess that's about all we've got. This series, as well as the rest of the podcasts released through fanstalkpodcast.com, are supported exclusively by our Patreon subscribers. You also can subscribe today for as little as $1 a month to receive early access to our content, as well as exclusive content. So, for Garvin, this is Nick, and we'll see you next week. Fans Talk TNA is part of the Fans Talk podcast family and can be found at fanstalktna.com. The Fans Talk podcast family is a subsidiary of Tiger Creative LLC.